So did people at the time keep diaries? Did they think about like writing about their own lives at the time like we do, like recording ourselves as much, or that wasn't?
I think for most people, they're illiterate. Mass illiteracy is definitely a thing.
Okay.
So when we are talking about like what was it like for the Romans, like on a daily basis, I think the first thing to say is, well, it depends on what era, because we're talking about thousands of years here, and it does change over time. But in the main, the ancient world was largely rural and agrarian. Most people were doing farming. Most people were doing either subsistence farming or, maybe they've got a surplus that they can sell into the market. And so you are living and working on farms in those little communities. And it's kind of the same way that we think about, rural agrarian communities at any time and place. You're kind of circumscribed. You're probably not going within 50 miles of where you grew up. You're living and dying.
Going further than you mean?
Yeah. Excuse me.
For sure. Very similar still to a lot of places today.
It's very similar. These are very human things. Like people don't go far from home. And so that's their life. Is they are living, a life of rural agrarian work, which is either nice or not, depending on if you like the work. If, when it's going good, it's going good. If there's a drought and then famine is sweeping through, and that's not so good. But we also do have at this point the rise of like major urban centers. So there is a major urban society that's happening inside Rome.
When you say a major urban society, like what does that mean?
I'm talking metropolises,
okay,
cities in the way we think about cities.
Okay.
And Rome, for example, was the first city in history to go over 1 million people. That's how big it was at its height. It was, there's 1 million people there. That's as
big as Tucson. I think how many people are in Tucson, Arizona? I bet that's about the same. Oh, Tucson only has 542,000.
Try Milwaukee. Milwaukee's probably like 500,000.
Yeah, I bet it's close too.
Look at that.
So the size of Milwaukee and Tucson combined, there we'll go.
Yeah. Double the size of Milwaukee.
I love Milwaukee.
I do too. Yeah, Milwaukee's a great little city. But anyway, getting back to it. So Rome actually is like a huge city, and there are other cities that are over 100,000 people. This is big for the ancient world, and inside of those cities, you do have sort of this is when you have a different life depending on what era of Roman history you're actually talking about, whether you're there as a wage worker, whether you're an artisan, whether you're one of the elite, and whether you're involved in the law. Like there's this whole like stratification of like professions that you can have. And then we get into later sort of like the bread and circuses aspect of Roman civilization, where the empire itself became so rich and so powerful, and all like the wealth of the entire Mediterranean world is like flowing into this city. Wow. And this is what's causing people to like move there and come into Rome. And then, we do need to feed these people. And so you start getting like grain doles and then, circuses and games were always a huge, huge part of Roman society. And so they would throw these spectacles for people. And there is a book about daily life in ancient Rome that, at the height of the empire, a lot of what you were doing is kind of like bouncing around from patron to patron, picking up a few coins from this guy, picking up a few coins from that guy, getting through your day, and then getting up the next morning and doing it all over again. And you didn't really have a profession. You were able to just kind of like bum around.
Figure out your hustle a little bit. Mm-hmm. What did people wear during the time? Like what was some common garb kind of?
Well, I am not an expert on what they were wearing around.
Oh yeah, I feel that.
For sure. But I can say this, the sort of the togas that we all imagine them wearing, this is very upper crust wear. Like the toga was, practically a tuxedo. Like you would clock that in Roman society is like this person's walking around in something very fancy. And it's something that the senatorial class would wear around. So like most people are not bumming around in daily life wearing a toga. And those were actually like, they're very cumbersome, right, to wear around. It was a cumbersome piece of clothing. Yeah,
it's almost like you're playing hide and go seek in your own clothing. It's very, because you think it's going to be easy and you got to keep this end up. It's like people's like, yeah, I'm a ghost or whatever. And you probably had a nice piece of fabric from somewhere, which was something only wealthy people would have.
Yeah. And when you get into sort of like what are the fruits of having this kind of empire and having trade routes that are now reaching to China? They've got silks coming in. They've got other kinds of like fancy finery that they get to wear. But like most people are in rough tunics, and like some sandals. And that's about what they're wearing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you didn't have any Air Force Ones or anything. Did they have what were people eating at the time?
If you are just a peasant, you're eating whatever's around, barley, millet, like
that, parts of beer.
Yeah, there's a lot of barley and millet, that's going around. If you're on the coast, you've got fish coming in, and you've got different kinds of the fruits of the fruits de mer, right, in French, which is the fruits of the sea, which is seafood. There's some. There's meat. There is red meat that people are eating, but it's, in far less quantities than we eat today. And then, you can get Roman cookbooks today where people go through like different recipes that we sort of knew that they had. And like, dormice always seem to show up as one of the things that people like to eat.
A little dormouse.
Yeah,
huh?
a little dormouse action. We always got to do that when we do Roman food. There's a great sort of like fish sauce called garum that they were all, that they were wild for, which is actually the principal export of Pompeii.
Was garum?
Yeah, before
fish sauce?
Yeah, they're famous for their fish sauce. Wow. And then what are they drinking? They're drinking wine, and there's a lot of wine being consumed in the ancient world, and they would make this like it was a very thick wine, and so
like a port almost.
Yeah, but so much so that like you would cut it with water, and so it was almost like concentrate, right? And the way it's like Kool-Aid.
I remember we used to have like that. They used to sell that orange juice concentrate in the frozen block.
Oh yeah, that's good.
And your mom would buy that.
Yeah,
and put that into something.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically that, and that's a lot of what their wine was.
So a lot of their wine was a concentrate.
Yeah.
And then people would cut it with water. And then have themselves a bit.
And there would be, sort of like, if somebody was really, had a problem with alcohol, you would say that they drank it without cutting it. Ooh. That was like a thing that would get passed around.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh
yeah. He would just drink it straight. That's not so good.
Oh, Ricky's drinking it straight, huh? Oh, he's not doing well.
No, he's not doing well. We need to have an intervention.
Yeah. How did people? What was plumbing like? Waste management. How did people wash their clothes?
Okay. These are not areas I'm an expert in.
Okay.
So, but I can tell you some things, because the Romans were very good about aqueducts and sort of having running water in different places. But, they've got pipes, they've got public latrines. But sometimes you've also just got chamber pots that you're filling up and throwing out the window when you're done with it. One of the things about the past is that it probably stunk to high heaven everywhere you go. Yeah. Yeah. Like when you read about the way people live,
I wouldn't want that.
Yeah. Like, when you go back to the past, like, it'd be so great. It's like, yeah, you'd be like, this smells gross. Cause I've done a lot of work like in French history too. And like in the Louvre, which used to be like a palace of the king, they would talk about, and this is up through like the 1600s, just like princes and nobles, like if they had to go to the bathroom, they would just literally go pee in the corner of a room. This is what they were doing.
No way.
And this is something that is
like
really,
a SIG app or whatever.
Yeah, like okay. Because we've gotten very used today to the glories of indoor plumbing and what it can do for us.
It's kind of cool though to just be like, keep talking. You just turn your back and just piss the other way, or somebody comes by with a little piss hat and you piss in there and they run off with it or whatever. I don't even know what they would do with it. Would they recycle the urine at all? Did they need like fluids that bad back then?
So not fluids, but what they did need was like the chemicals that are in human urine. Like this ties directly into your point of like, how did they do laundry? Those chemicals that could be extracted from human urine was great for washing clothes. Yeah. This is
Really, Romans clean their clothes using a mixture of water, alkali, often urine, and fuller's earth. The urine provided ammonia, a natural detergent.
There you go.
While the fuller's earth acted as an abrasive to remove dirt. The process involved washing the clothes in vats, often with the fullers or their slaves treading on them to agitate the clothes. After washing, the clothes were rinsed and dried. That's kind of crazy to think that you would use urine and earth to clean something.
And who figured that one out?
There's,
it's like that's like the thing. The bravest man who ever lived was the first person to eat an oyster.
Yeah.
There's like there's those little things. It's like, okay, there was a guy who figured out that if you peed on clothes, you could get them clean.
Yeah.
Who was that guy? What was that guy's story? Because we have no idea.
Could a peasant rise up in society at the time? Was there any chance of that? Like, because I think there's this idea, right, that like you're the peasant on the parade route and you see the princess go by and you catch her eye. Mm-hmm. And then you have a chance to be her boyfriend or whatever, or spouse or whatever. I think that's every like poor kid's dream,
Mm-hmm.
Like certainly when I was growing up, you would think like some rich girl would see you and then her dad would think you were nice. And then you would have a chance to help run his car dealership one day.
Right. That's the dream.
Or coin car wash, dude. We had this hottie at our school, dude, named Emily, dude. And her dad had 2 coin car washes,
Great.
bro.
Yeah.
Oh,
aspirations of a lifetime.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and that's what you could have been doing. And instead, you're stuck here doing this. I bet that what an awful turn of events. But you could have had 2 coin-operated car dealerships. And instead, you just have a very successful career in podcasting.
What were women regarded like at the time? Because there were female goddesses.
Sure.
So obviously there was and it was a war society, and you had like Athena, the god of war, Athena. Mm-hmm. But you had female goddesses that were powerful. How were women viewed in society during Roman times?
So it's a strongly patriarchal society, and the head of the household is invariably a man, and they are in charge of everything. And so if you're a woman, in one respect, you don't really have rights at all. Like who you marry, what happens to you, where you go. Like most of these things are completely out of your hand.
Wow.
And what you're really there to do, the most important thing that you can do is make babies to fill the legions so that we can continue to be this strong military society that we are. But all of that said, the Romans also did have written into law, actually, there did become spaces for women to own property in their own right, to be able to manage some of their own affairs financially. A lot of early Christianity, for example, is bankrolled by wealthy widows because they had had a husband, they had had a family. That husband dies, they don't remarry. There is legal space for them to exist as a widow who's unconnected to a man who controls her own money. And when the story of early Christianity, like who was a patron of this, like who was patronizing these early Christian groups, a lot of it is like wealthy widows is where the money is coming from. So it's a mixed bag, but I would say like in the main, if you were a woman in Roman society, you do not have a ton of rights at all.
What did they do like if children were born with disabilities, handicaps and stuff like that? How were people treated like that?
Not great. Exposure is a thing,
And what does that mean, exposure? Like
put them out on a trash pile?
Really?
Yeah.
Fuck, that's crazy, dude. What did people think of life at the time? Did they value their life? Did it mean as much to them as it seems like it does to us today in America? Does that make sense to you?
It does. And I think it did. I think their lives did matter to them a lot. And even though, we were just talking about like exposing babies because they couldn't live, right? That was like a difficult choice that they would make. But we often today, because we have all this advanced medical technology and because we have vaccines and because we've basically eradicated childhood diseases, which is one of the biggest killers in world history, like childhood vaccines is one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of human civilization, right? Prior to the 20th century, the mortality rates for children were appalling. And this is why you had to have 6, 7 kids because 3 or 4 of them might not live to adulthood.
Wow, bring that up.
And so we think these days that like, oh, because there was that much death surrounding them at all times, because loved ones were dropping dead left and right, that they must have been more callous. They can't possibly have cared about each other as much if they're just going to die. And I have, in all of the historical studies that I have done, I just don't find that to be true. People loved their children. We love our children as human beings, right? It wasn't different for them. If a woman gives birth to a child, she loves that child. And if that child dies at the age of 18 months, that is a devastating tragedy. It is the worst thing that can happen to a person, is the death of a child, full stop. Yeah. Nothing else even comes close. It affected them in that way. They cared about each other in that way. They tried to protect each other and save each other. We are always fighting for life, and we are always fighting to save people that we love. And so it is absolutely not the case that they were more callous or more hard-hearted.
Why do we get that idea then? Because I see what you're saying. Because God, I can only imagine.
Because we can't conceive of what that must have been like. Wow. Because if I had 5 kids, I mean, if either one of my kids died, that's it. I'm a wreck. Like I don't even know how to recover from that.
Yeah, we just had a guy on, Kevin Von Erich, and he has a famous movie. He has a famous life. 5 of his brothers died.
Okay.
They were professional wrestlers in the 80s, 70s and 80s in Texas, and 5 of them died from suicides and different. And he said that, and he's just a remarkable man. He said, I lost all my brothers, he goes, but I could not imagine losing one of my children.
Yep.
And it was just fascinating. Not fascinating to hear that. Of course, you get that, but it's interesting to think that the weight of that would be. It's interesting to have some quantifiable weight of that coming from someone like him and hearing it from you. Let me see. In ancient Rome, infant mortality was significantly higher than today, with estimates suggesting that about 25 to 30% of children died in their first year of life.
Yep.
Wow.
That's every single one of those deaths mattered.
Right.
Every single one of them mattered.
You almost had to have 3 children to get 2 children.
Yep.
God.
Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's hard, man. And that's why vaccines are so great. That's why it's so important that they exist, because what was killing these kids? It was early childhood diseases.
Yeah, bring up how did vaccines change the life expectancy of children? Just so we know that. We've never looked at that. You hear everybody talk about vaccines. We've talked about we've listened a lot about it in here. Let me see. Child immunization specifically started with Edward Jenner's successful smallpox vaccination in 1796.
Yeah.
The practice of vaccination, including for smallpox, gained traction throughout the 19th century, with Massachusetts being the first state to require it for school children in 1853.
Yeah, great.
Dude, they should require it in Massachusetts just for that accent. You know what I'm saying?
But I mean, this is obviously something that has been at the forefront of like scientific investigation forever.
The fact that it was such a problem that they were losing this many children, that it was like, this is something we have to figure out.
If we can figure this out and stop this, let's do it. Because every one of those deaths, it's not just like we've lost that person. Like every person who was connected to that kid is now traumatized by that. So you have these societies that just everybody is walking around not hard-hearted, not caring about these things, but basically victims of trauma. They've all been traumatized, and that does inform what previous societies were like. That had a lot more to do with the fact that we care about each other than the fact that we did not care about each other.
Wow. And I bet care was almost at a different depth then, because moments probably meant something more, because it was literally in the trash pile of your, like the mourning was on the curb of not only of your heart, but of your home. Oh, I can't even imagine that.
It's a hard thing to imagine. Yeah.
And God, I think, imagine how much more how real it was then. I guess it's a blessing that we have today, is how we're able to kind of hide things from our own reality in a way. But at this time, even literacy was kind of a delicacy.
Yeah. Literacy was a very rarefied thing.
And did they have like prostitutes and stuff like that? What was that? Was that going on?
Oh, sure, man. That's the world's oldest profession. So,
yeah, dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
PLM, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. There were sex workers.
Yeah,
for sure. And then they would. do whatever they wanted to do, but they're living off the best food. They have household slaves who are doing all the manual labor for them, up to and including, at certain points, like literally hand feeding them. You can
really, you could have them do it. I mean, would people get kind of exorbitant at that time? How strange did it get? Do you feel like?
Well, it probably got pretty freaky. There is definitely. There's some like satires that were written. There were some humorous sort of satires that were written about the life of the aristocracy, and these are very much like, oh yeah, what was going on behind closed doors was quite,
we would consider it taboo. Like was it perverted? Like, was it like, I mean, I know like was it like pedophilia type stuff?
No, nothing. No, I don't think it's anything like that. Although in some times and places, yeah, for sure. Because that's always been something that's been with us, unfortunately. But yeah, there's orgies, there's drinking parties, there's, they're putting on, theatrical plays and, it's bawdy, it's ribald, all
like
that.
Bacchanalia.
Yeah, Bacchanalia. I mean, that's where this stuff comes from.
Yeah, I grew up in the New Orleans area, so it's like we would, you'd see the different parades. I mean, the list we put up earlier, that's 80% of the names of all the different parade groups that are there.
Yeah.
Because if you were just a peasant, as a regular person, was a lot of your life dictated by what what your government chose kind of for you?
A lot of people who are just living their lives don't encounter the government at all, right? Like when we think about, especially like the High Empire, the interaction between even the imperial bureaucracy, let alone the emperor themselves, and really like these peasant communities in Spain or in Gaul or in Syria or whatever, almost certainly you're not encountering the Romans and Roman bureaucratic administrative anything at all. You're going to encounter your local elites because they're going to come around and ask you for taxes. And that's the main thing is like, are you paying your taxes? Are the taxes of your community being generated? Most of that work, though, is being done either by private contractors, which they had an extensive private contracting operation to do tax collection, or it was the local elites who are doing this. So mostly you are just going about your own daily life. You're not really thinking about the wider world at all. You're certainly not encountering the Romans in any real way. And when we talk about sort of the tyrannical emperors, like the worst emperors like Nero and Caligula, and we hear these stories about how horrible they were to people, all of that was being done to the senatorial class, right? The senatorial class were the people who were actually in the orbit of the emperor, such that the emperor and the emperor's power could touch them immediately. You could be arrested and you could be executed by a mad emperor at any time. But that's not happening to peasants. It was not about like the oppression of the people. And in fact, if we really went back through it and really started doing like revisions of what we think about things, there's definitely a revisionist case to be made for Caligula. There's a revisionist case to be made for Nero, that they were actually, if you talk to regular people, they were like, we loved him. That guy was great. He looked out for us. He gave us money. The only people who don't like him are the senators because he's abusing the senators. But who writes the history?
The senators.
The senators write the history. And so now we hear all the bad things about these guys because they were mostly bad to the senatorial class. Maybe they get into the equites a little bit.
But I still love that the effects of things fell on the higher ups, like even the higher ups, like you're saying, had to go out and fight the battles. Like still, because it seems like now more the effects of things,
right?
Because it's so capitalistic now that the effects of things fall on the lower class. But even then, the effects of things fell on the higher class. Did they have brothels then?
Of course, yeah. Brothels are everywhere, always, especially around legionary camps.
Really?
Of course.
For the war?
For just being a soldier.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times it's,
Were they cool or what were they like? Did they have AC in there? No AC, huh?
They have AC in the brothels of ancient Rome.
Sorry,
no, they did not. It was hot in there. Probably.
But they have a cold guy to fucking.
Well, their baths were incredible.
Really?
Yeah, sure. They had like, Roman baths had like a tepidarium and a frigidarium, and the frigidarium is like the cold room and the cold bath, and you could go in there and cool off, and they would do this like the hot plunge and the cold plunge, and they had this all down to a science, man.
Ooh, that's one of them?
Yeah, they did understand how to make a good bathhouse. That is absolutely true.
And were the brothels hooked to the bathhouse a lot of times?
I don't know. Probably they were close to each other, but I don't want somebody to now send me an email and be like, no, that's not actually where the brothel was.
Oh, people are sick. I hope that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, they both seem pretty good.
There you go. According to the AI.
Right.
Who knows if it's true?